What is a not fun fact? During WW2, the Japanese built a human testing facility in China, which has come to be known as Unit 731. This was worse than a lot of concentration camps, but the people involved were never punished because the US granted them immunity and attempted to cover it up in exchange for access to their research. The Soviet Union attempted to try the people involved, and the US called it communist propaganda. The test subjects involved prisoners, but also the homeless, the mentally disabled, and random Chinese civilians kidnapped from nearby towns, including pregnant women and infants. Vivisections, cutting a person open with a T-shaped cut, were regularly performed, usually without anesthesia. Patients' limbs were randomly removed and improperly reattached to see what would happen, and internal organs were also randomly taken. All without anesthesia, of course. Prisoners were also injected with STDs, mainly syphilis, and then forced at gunpoint to rape other prisoners to spread the disease. Some of these prisoners included pregnant women, in which case they would either be vivisected live and have their fetuses removed, or the syphilis-riddled babies would be born and eventually killed. They also participated in biological warfare in several cities, usually by infecting fleas with paratyphoid and releasing them. They tested any and all sorts of weapons on the prisoners, notably grenades and chemical bombs. They also stuck people in pressure chambers until their eyeballs popped, spun people in centrifuges until they died, burned them alive, stuck people in gas chambers, injected them with random substances, and froze their limbs before breaking them off. Most of the experiments had no practical application, and were done purely out of sadism. The Japanese government didn't officially admit to this until 2003, and the US still actively denies it. There is a mysterious illness called the sweating sickness that hit in multiple small epidemics in the early modern era. It was incredibly contagious and massively deadly, with about a 50% average death rate, but it could be higher. It began with an ominous sense of apprehension, followed by severe pains in the neck and giddiness. They then abruptly stopped and switched to heavy sweating, headaches and delirium. Finally, the person was hit with an extreme urge to sleep, and it was thought to be fatal if you fell to it. We know almost nothing about it, nothing about how it spread, how it was caused, only that if you got it you were either surviving or dead within 24 hours. There are horror stories of people leaving town on hunting trips and returning the same day to find almost everybody in the village dead, with only a few scattered survivors. The worst thing was, you did not gain immunity. You could live through the sweating sickness once, and then get it a few days later and die. Or live through it 2 or 3 times, and then get it and die. It was horrific, and we don't know why it disappeared and we don't know if it will ever return. Edit, I seem to be posting the wiki link a lot, so here it is, https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/sweating_sickness. Story time. I was a dumb 14-year-old British tourist in Australia. 10-year-old sister and I went down to the beach, leaving my parents at the pub. The beach was empty, which we thought was great. Popped our snorkeling gear on and went for a swim. There was an amazing octopus, only small but had these bright blue rings on it. Looked really pretty. It swam away from us and hid itself under a rock, so in my infinite wisdom, I took my snorkel out of my mouth and proceeded to poke it under the rock, trying to flush the octopus back out. After a few minutes we got bored and I put the snorkel straight back into my mouth and carried on my merry way. Later, we get out of the water and notice a bunch of signs all along the beach, many, large warning signs saying do not go in the water, there are heaps of blue ring octopus, you will die. Holy shit, the story is just scary. Trigger warning. As Barcy's career success increased, her father Joseph, an alcoholic, became increasingly angry and would routinely threaten to kill himself, his wife and daughter. His drinking led to 3 arrests for driving under the influence of alcohol. In December 1986, Maria reported his threats and physical violence toward her to the police. After the police found no physical signs of abuse, she decided not to press charges against him. After the incident with the police, Joseph reportedly stopped drinking, but continued to threaten Maria and Judith. His various threats included cutting their throats as well as burning down the house. He also reportedly hid a telegram informing Maria that a relative in Hungary had died, in an attempt to prevent her from leaving the United States with Judith. The physical violence continued, with Barsi telling a friend that her father threw pots and pans at her, resulting in a nosebleed. As a result of her abuse, Barsi began gaining weight and exhibited disturbing behavior, such as plucking out her eyelashes and pulling out her cat's whiskers, see trichotillomania. In May 1988, after breaking down in front of her agent, Ruth Hansen, Barsi was taken by Maria to a child psychologist, who identified severe physical and emotional abuse and reported her findings to Child Protective Services. The investigation was dropped after Maria assured the caseworker that she intended to begin divorce proceedings against Joseph and that she and Judith were going to move into a Panorama City apartment she had recently rented as a daytime haven from him. Maria's friends urged her to follow through with the plan, but she hesitated due to her fear of losing the family home and belongings. On July 28, 1988, the Los Angeles Times reported that 3 people were found dead in an apparent murder, suicide, and that the bodies were believed to be those of Barsi, her mother Maria, and her father Joseph. The article quoted police Lt. Warren Knowles as saying a flammable liquid, likely gasoline, had been poured on the bodies of Maria and Judith by Joseph. Joseph's body was found in the garage, dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Neighbor Eunice Daly stated she heard a gunshot around 8:30 a.m. on July 27, prompting her to call the police. Chronic wasting disease. Forgive me, I'm no expert, it's a prion disease. It's kind of like mad cow disease for deer. It's 100% fatal. The problem comes with the fact that prions cannot be destroyed. So the infected deer can urinate in a field, spreading this disease into the soil, then into the foods we eat. It's been shown to infect some primates as well. So the risk of human transmission must not be ignored. Learning that last night definitely kept me from sleeping soundly. ETA, I'm no expert on this by any means. So if you have relevant info to add or I need correcting, please do so. Edit 2. If you are concerned by the spread of chronic wasting disease and the potential it has to impact human health, I advise you all to reach out to your representatives and let them know that you want more federal funding invested to support the surveillance and research of CWD. It's not yet a public health crisis, and it might never become one, but we have the opportunity to prevent it from becoming one. Also shout out to you/Food for educating me in regards to this. Koalas are fucking horrible animals. They have one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any mammal. Additionally, their brains are smooth. A brain is folded to increase the surface area for neurons. If you present a koala with leaves plucked from a branch, laid on a flat surface, the koala will not recognize it as food. They are too thick to adapt their feeding behavior to cope with change. In a room full of potential food, they can literally starve to death. This is not the token of an animal that is winning at life. Speaking of stupidity and food, one of the likely reasons for their primitive brains is the fact that additionally to being poisonous, eucalyptus leaves, the only thing they eat, have almost no nutritional value. They can't afford the extra energy to think. They sleep more than 80% of their fucking lives. When they are awake, all they do is eat, shit, and occasionally scream like fucking Satan. Because eucalyptus leaves hold such little nutritional value, koalas have to ferment the leaves in their guts for days on end. Unlike their brains, they have the largest hindgut to body ratio of any mammal. Many herbivorous mammals have adaptations to cope with harsh plant life taking its toll on their teeth. Rodents, for instance, have teeth that never stop growing. Some animals only have teeth on their lower jaw, grinding plant matter on bony plates in the tops of their mouths. Others have enlarged molars that distribute the wear and break down plant matter more efficiently. Koalas are no exception. When their teeth erode down to nothing, they resolve the situation by starving to death, because they're fucking terrible animals. Being mammals, koalas raise their joeys on milk, admittedly, one of the lowest milk yields to body ratio. There's a trend here. When the young joey needs to transition from rich, nourishing substances like milk, to eucalyptus, a plant that seems to be making it abundantly clear that it doesn't want to be eaten, it finds it does not have the necessary gut flora to digest the leaves. To remedy this, the young joey begins nuzzling its mother's anus until she leaks a little diarrhea, actually fecal pap, slightly less digested, which he then proceeds to slurp on. This partially digested plant matter gives him just what he needs to start developing his digestive system. Of course, he may not even have needed to bother nuzzling his mother. She may have been suffering from incontinence. Why? Because koalas are riddled with chlamydia. In some areas the infection rate is 80% or higher. This statistic isn't helped by the fact that one of the few other activities koalas will spend their precious energy on is rape. Despite being seasonal breeders, males seem to either not know or care, and will simply overpower a female regardless of whether she is ovulating. If she fights back, he may drag them both out of the tree, which brings us full circle back to the brain. Koalas have a higher than average quantity of cerebrospinal fluid in their brains. This is to protect their brains from injury, should they fall from a tree. An animal so thick it has its own little built-in special ed helmet. I fucking hate them. Just gonna leave this classique here, rabies. It's exceptionally common, but people just don't run into the animals that carry it often. Skunks especially, and bats. Let me paint you a picture. You go camping, and at midday you decide to take a nap in a nice little hammock. While sleeping, a tiny brown bat, in the rage stages of infection, is fidgeting in broad daylight, uncomfortable, and thirsty, due to the hydrophobia, and you snort, startling him. He goes into attack mode. Except you're asleep, and he's a little brown bat, so weighs around 6 grams. You don't even feel him land on your bare knee, and he starts to bite. His teeth are tiny. Hardly enough to even break the skin, but he does manage to give you the equivalent of a tiny scrape that goes completely unnoticed. Rabies does not travel in your blood. In fact, a blood test won't even tell you if you've got it. Antibody tests may be done, but are useless if you've ever been vaccinated. You wake up, none the wiser. If you notice anything at the bite site at all, you assume you just lightly scraped it on something. The bomb has been lit, and your nervous system is the wick. The rabies will multiply along your nervous system, doing virtually no damage, and completely undetectable. You literally have no symptoms. It may be 4 days, it may be a year, but the camping trip is most likely long forgotten. Then one day your back starts to ache. Or maybe you get a slight headache. At this point, you're already dead. There is no cure. The sole caveat to this is the Milwaukee Protocol, which leaves most patients dead anyway, and the survivors mentally disabled, and is seldom done. There's no treatment. It has a 100% kill rate. Absorb that. Not a single other virus on the planet has a 100% kill rate. Only rabies. And once you're symptomatic, it's over. You're dead. So what does that look like? Your headache turns into a fever, and a general feeling of being unwell. You're fidgety, uncomfortable, and scared. As the virus that has taken its time getting into your brain finds a vast network of nerve endings, it begins to rapidly reproduce, starting at the base of your brain, where your pons is located. This is the part of the brain that controls communication between the rest of the brain and body, as well as sleep cycles. Next you become anxious. You still think you have only a mild fever, but suddenly you find yourself becoming scared, even horrified, and it doesn't occur to you that you don't know why. This is because the rabies is chewing up your amygdala. As your cerebellum becomes hot with the virus, you begin to lose muscle coordination and balance. You think maybe it's a good idea to go to the doctor now, but assuming a doctor is smart enough to even run the tests necessary in the few days you have left on the planet, odds are they'll only be able to tell your loved ones what you died of later. You're twitchy, shaking, and scared. You have the normal fear of not knowing what's going on, but with the virus really fucking the amygdala, this is amplified 100-fold. It's around this time the hydrophobia starts. You're horribly thirsty, you just want water. But you can't drink. Every time you do, your throat clamps shut and you vomit. This has become a legitimate, active fear of water. You're thirsty, but looking at a glass of water begins to make you gag, and shy back in fear. The contradiction is hard for your hot brain to see at this point. By now, the doctors will have to put you on IVs to keep you hydrated, but even that's futile. You were dead the second you had a headache. You begin hearing things, or not hearing at all as your thalamus goes. You taste sounds, you see smells, everything starts feeling like the most horrifying acid trip anyone has ever been on. With your hippocampus long under attack, you're having trouble remembering things, especially family. You're alone, hallucinating, thirsty, confused, and absolutely, undeniably terrified. Everything scares the literal shit out of you at this point. These strange people in lab coats. These strange people standing around your bed crying, who keep trying to get you drink something and crying. And it's only been about a week since that little headache that you've completely forgotten. Time means nothing to you anymore. Funny enough, you now know how the bat felt when he bit you. Eventually, you slip into the dumb rabies phase. Your brain has started the process of shutting down. Too much of it has been turned to liquid virus. Your face droops. You drool. You're all but unaware of what's around you. A sudden noise or light might startle you, but for the most part, it's all you can do to just stare at the ground. You haven't really slept for about 72 hours. Then you die. Always, you die. Koalas are terrible animals. Koalas are fucking horrible animals. They have one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any mammal. Additionally, their brains are smooth. A brain is folded to increase the surface area for neurons. If you present a koala with leaves plucked from a branch, laid on a flat surface, the koala will not recognize it as food. They are too thick to adapt their feeding behavior to cope with change. In a room full of potential food, they can literally starve to death. This is not the token of an animal that is winning at life. Speaking of stupidity and food, one of the likely reasons for their primitive brains is the fact that additionally to being poisonous, eucalyptus leaves, the only thing they eat, have almost no nutritional value. They can't afford the extra energy to think, they sleep more than 80% of their fucking lives. When they are awake all they do is eat, shit and occasionally scream like fucking Satan. Because eucalyptus leaves hold such little nutritional value, koalas have to ferment the leaves in their guts for days on end. Unlike their brains, they have the largest hindgut to body ratio of any mammal. Many herbivorous mammals have adaptations to cope with harsh plant life taking its toll on their teeth. Rodents for instance have teeth that never stop growing. Some animals only have teeth on their lower jaw, grinding plant matter on bony plates in the tops of their mouths. Others have enlarged molars that distribute the wear and break down plant matter more efficiently. Koalas are no exception. When their teeth erode down to nothing, they resolve the situation by starving to death, because they're fucking terrible animals. Being mammals, koalas raise their joeys on milk, admittedly, one of the lowest milk yields to body ratio. There's a trend here. When the young joey needs to transition from rich, nourishing substances like milk, to eucalyptus, a plant that seems to be making it abundantly clear that it doesn't want to be eaten, it finds it does not have the necessary gut flora to digest the leaves. To remedy this, the young Joey begins nuzzling its mother's anus until she leaks a little diarrhea, actually fecal pap, slightly less digested, which he then proceeds to slurp on. This partially digested plant matter gives him just what he needs to start developing his digestive system. Of course, he may not even have needed to bother nuzzling his mother. She